So we are here for the penultimate Ahsoka discussion show. This is part 7 about dreams and madness. And I'm your host, Mike Burton. If you haven't checked out my other stuff, check out the previous few episodes of the Ahsoka discussion shows. Check out my other Star Wars content. There's tons of it. And my genuine chit-chat stuff as well. But today I'm joined with yet another different guest. I've succeeded in getting a different guest each week, which was what I was aiming for, because I want it to be different perspective each time. You know, last week was Ben, who's very critical. The week before that, I think, was Thomas, who was the very opposite of that. He was very positive, which is great. And then this week, I think we've got slightly more balanced. We've got an individual whose name would allude to something where he has an emotion that he doesn't actually always experience, surprisingly enough. And that is Angry Andy. Good sir, how have you been finding, before we get into part 7, the whole of Ahsoka, and you can be as brutal as you want here, from parts 1 to part 6, how did you find Ahsoka? And also, what were you like really hyped for Ahsoka and it's not reached those expectations? Or have you got into that kind of thing where, apart from probably Andor, the quality of live action Star Wars is plateaued at a point? Like, what are your kind of general views on that as a whole and Ahsoka before delving into part 7?
Yeah, I do feel we're in a bit of a weird space with not just live action Star Wars, but live action Disney Plus stuff in general. I think shows, and I feel like with Star Wars, I think we are at the moment a very, I don't know, a bit of a middling sort of area. And with Ahsoka, I wasn't really all that excited, but I was intrigued because I do like Rebels. It's not one of my most favorite things in Star Wars. I like it enough. I did very much enjoy certain parts of it. There are some incredible episodes in that series. So there was that level of intrigue there for me about these characters coming into the fore, into live action, and obviously the anticipation of Thrawn returning and all that, all the grandiose malevolence that he brings. But yeah, I wasn't really all that excited for it in the sense of jumping out. I've got to watch this straight off the bat. First thing in the morning, I've got to get up and go and see it, like I have done with all the Star Wars movies of the last few years. So for me, this series has started off quite well. And then it seems to have been a bit of an up and down journey for me right the way through. I call it the yo-yo. I'm constantly feeling like a yo-yo feeling with the show. 1 minute I'm really like, okay, that's great. The next minute I'm like, oh, what on earth are you doing? And I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. Is it the writing that's inconsistent? Is it the performances? Is it the editing? And I'll be talking a lot about editing in this episode. I don't know what it is. I am almost in the middle. Unfortunately, I think I am starting to slide into really disappointed territory with this, and especially with this being the penultimate episode. This episode is the last one before the finale, and I don't know what they were thinking with this. To be quite honest, I don't know where it leads us, where it leaves us with the final episode. There's going to be a lot of unanswered questions, and I think there is going to be one really big unanswered question with regards to a certain character, because the guy ain't with us anymore, and I think we're going to be left with a big gaping hole. I think, but we'll come to that at towards the end. I'm confused more than anything. I'm confused. Like I said, some parts of it are really, really exciting for me. I really like Baylan Soll. I really like Thrawn. Obviously, it's the guy who is the same voice actor, in live action. He looks the part. He sounds the part. He sounds exactly like I would have thought him to sound reading Heir to the Empire all those years ago. God, it's over 20 odd years ago for me now when I read that the first time. He's exactly as I imagined, and yet there's still some niggling disappointments with what they're doing with it so far. It is completely up and down for me, this show. Completely up and down.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that for me, the weakest live action show I think has been either Book of Boba Fett or Kenobi. Yeah. I think I probably enjoyed Kenobi more due to the nostalgia, and because for me it mirrored the prequels in a lot of ways, which is there's a lot of weakness, but there's certain scenes that I think are so good I can kind of deal with the crappiness to be excited for a certain scene or two, even though Kenobi had almost no plot in the sense of there was zero dramatic tension because the three main characters all survive. So it's like there's no dramatic tension of any kind. And as soon as they introduced a character, you thought, oh, I'd love to see more of them. Oh, they're dead. It's like, you could have had them gone and do other stuff. And then Boba Fett was like, oh, this is kind of going in a different direction I expected. Oh, no, we're not. We're going Mandalorian stuff. Okay, and then we're back and we've got kaijus and crazy stuff. And it's like, I don't know what this was, like 3 different series mushed together.
Yeah.
And I've said it, I think, on the last episode, but like my brother, he hates the prequels, to be honest. He's like 17 odd years older than me. So he hates the prequels. I
remember you saying,
And he's just like, Book of Boba Fett, why you create the Mandalorian character who is basically like Boba Fett was in the original trilogy, and he's way cooler in every way, and then you get Boba Fett and you're like, let's just have Tamara Morrison with his hat off, with his helmet off, walking around a lot, and have Fennec Shand better than every way. And it's like, it's hard to argue that point. So I want to ask you before we delve into, because there are, I have been enjoying Ahsoka as a series as a whole. I think it has been up and down, but for me, it's been more of a bumpy. It's been more of a bumpy road than like a yo-yo or a roller coaster. It's kind of been like this a bit more, kind of up and down. Nothing for me has been terrible, but there hasn't really been that many moments that have been like whoa. And I was hoping. I'd rather have a show that has more whoa moments and a few weaker ones than is just kind of middling. But out of interest, with Star Wars, like, what is your favorite? I assume your favorite Star Wars content is probably the original trilogy. But like, second to that, what would your favorite be? Is it Clone Wars? Is it some of the novels? Like, what would you hope for in Star Wars? Obviously, it can't live up to the original trilogy for you. But like, what for you is kind of peak Star Wars post the original trilogy?
Well, post the original trilogy, I think.
As after release, not specifically time-wise after,
Yeah, I think I've read a lot of the old books, like the
expanded universe /
expanded
Legends.
universe. That's it, because they've changed it now, haven't they? Legacy stuff. Expanded universe. I've read quite a lot of books of that. Obviously, I think the Heir to the Empire. All those books from Timothy Zahn, I think they're some of my favourite. I've read through them numerous times. I've rebought them numerous times. But I think I do love the games. I do love playing the games, like the Jedi Survivor game. I think it's just brilliant. I can't wait for the next one. They've already announced it quite recently. They're working on it now. Great. Looking forward to that. And I'm always on the lookout for what they're going to do next with Star Wars games. It's been a bit difficult the last few years because loads of games have been cancelled.
Yeah.
And then obviously Battlefront 2 didn't start off very well. It upset a lot of people. It upset me. I stopped playing it and didn't go back to it, which is frustrating because the first Battlefront, I say the first one, the remake Battlefront that came out, I plowed hundreds of hours into that, battling online. And then the original Battlefront games from like the early 2000s,
I love them.
They were fantastic. They were genius. They were something we'd never had before, and yet it was everything we ever wanted, and yet we didn't know that we wanted that. But then obviously in terms of movies, I think Rogue One is, for me, it was exactly what I wanted to see. I wanted to see the struggle, the birth of, the rebellion. And then, of course, with Andor, we got an extension on that. I didn't think Andor would be as good as it was. I didn't think
no one did.
No, exactly. I mean, there's a lot of contention out there with with viewing figures for it, and how many people actually tuned in, which I think is a bit of a shame if it's as low as people say it is. But it's superbly well written. It's superbly well edited, shot, staged. And I think it's an embarrassment of riches in Andor that we haven't seen with anything else. And I think a lot of that is to do with because they brought creatives in that didn't necessarily have any existing stake in Star Wars. And this is where my sort of issues lie with this series. But yeah, I mean, my tastes, beyond beyond the original trilogy, are quite open. If I see something, I read something, then if it hits me, then I'm 100% invested in it. The High Republic, I've read the first book, I really enjoyed that. Started reading the second one, kind of drifted away from it. Can't remember the title exactly. But
Rising
again,
Storm.
I mean, there's so much content within that. I can't ingest it all.
Yeah.
I was reading Vader comics, so I was quite interested in those. But again, I've drifted away. I just seem to, wherever something really tickles me and gets me, then I'll stick with it for as long as I can. Yeah.
That's a good point. It's one of those, I mean, obviously people may know, but behind me, anyone who's watching on YouTube is like all the High Republic. I've got every single piece of High Republic content that is in existence, and so I'm obsessed with it. It's my jam. But it is like when in my free time, because I've finished all the High Republic books now, and there's not another one coming out for just under 2 months now, I'm actually taking a break from reading Star Wars content, and I'm like, I'm reading a few comics here and there, but I've got a handful of books, and I'm like, I need to read these before Phase 3 kicks off again, because I'm going to get obsessed and hyper-focused, and there's too much content. I can't catch up. I don't read that quickly, and I don't read every single night, and because I do the podcast, and my comic podcast, and etc., it's like, it's almost like 70% of my media consumption that I'm not watching with Megan on TV and stuff, but like in my own personal time, maybe even 80%, is just pure Star Wars. It just to keep up with the High Republic. Obviously, I read all the comics, every single one of them. They're not all great, let's be honest. And they're starting to wane a little bit for me, but I'm just in that realm. I'm like, I've done it all. I've invested all this. It's kind of why in the MCU, I've watched all the Secret Invasion, even though it's crap. And it's like, how much more am I going to keep consuming? With Star Wars, it's slightly different, but like with a Marvel, I'm like, how much more of this am I going to keep watching just because I've consumed all of it so far? And it's kind of easier to watch a bit of crap every now and then and keep up to date, rather than letting myself slip and then in a few years' time there be something amazing, but only is as amazing if I've consumed it all else. And I'm like, that's probably not the best reason to consume content. I should be consuming the best content out there, or my favorite, not just because I feel like I should. And that's what I did with Walking Dead. I stopped watching that around series 4 or 5 or something. And I probably gave up around series 2 or 3, but I was like, no, I've invested so many hours into Walking Dead, I'm going to push. And I was like, I can't deal with this anymore.
It's a difficult thing. It's a difficult thing, because it's one of my major arguments at the moment is I shouldn't watch something and then feel like I've missed something and almost have it tell me that I have to watch what's come before. Like because of Marvel, it's spread so thinly across multiple different things now, TV shows, multiple movies, shorts. It is demanding that you see everything, and I don't want to anymore.
No,
because some of the stuff doesn't speak to me, and yet if it doesn't speak to you, you shouldn't feel like you have to be forced to watch it. But they are, because you'll miss out. So if you haven't watched Miss Marvel, you're not going to know what the Marvels is about, because there's a character in there, from Miss Marvel, the TV series. If you didn't watch,
WandaVision.
WandaVision. Yeah,
Photon.
If you didn't watch WandaVision, you're not going to know who Monica Rambeau is in the Marvels. It's difficult, and I feel like there's almost a hint of that starting to pop through in Star Wars as well, and/or not the case. I mean, obviously, you had to watch Rogue One weirdly enough, you had to watch Rogue One to understand who the character is, to feel invested in the character, even though realistically we're watching Andor because it's a prequel. So but there are hints that are starting to come through in these series, because obviously we know that a bloody film's on the way, don't we? Whether it's going to be a Disney Plus film, whether it's going to be a cinematic film, who knows? But there is going to be a film, an Heir to the Empire sort of film, which bugs me a little bit, because they're obviously not going to include some really, really important elements from those books. Well, they might. I don't know. I'm just speculating, but the way they're setting the store at the minute, and you can suggest that certain things are not going to be included. But
the Nogri stuff is almost guaranteed not to be. They're like, we're going to have one Nogri, play Warwick Davis and Rebels, and then spoiler alert, he's dead, and that's literally the only part. And then you read the Heir to the Empire trilogy, you're like, the Nogri takes up like 20% of all the books and is a huge element of everything about it. And I was like, because I'd only started reading them in the last year, I've finished them and stuff, but I was like, wow, this Nogri culture is really interesting, and like all this stuff that Leia's doing with them, it's like really interesting perspective, and how their alliances are different and their interaction with Vader. I was like, this is so cool. And then I was rewatching Rebels, and I was like, oh yeah, because I knew Rook was there, and that's it. There's nothing else about the Nogri even mentioned. It's like odd,
and it's the depth, the level of depth, which I think is also missing in this show massively. I do feel like we're just churning through some ideas, some vague thoughts, just to get us to there as quickly as possible. I don't know, but it's really difficult. It's really difficult. I'm trying to sort of look for positives, and I hope in my mind I'm not doing that for the sake of it, just to hope that Heir to the Empire, if that's what it comes around to be, is done rightly and to the best it should be. But at the moment, I'm not looking forward to it, which is concerning for me.
Yeah, it's one of those where I'm finding one of the comparisons I've drawn, I think I said in the last episode, and I've sent a few of them, is Andor. I was proud to be a Star Wars fan with Andor because it's not just a good Star Wars show, it's just an amazing show that's in Star Wars. Yeah. That's what, there's certain Star Wars films. Rogue One, I'd argue that. You don't have to have seen Star Wars films. You probably loosely should. But if you'd never seen any Star Wars before in your life and you watch Rogue One, you're like, this is a good... It's like there's sci-fi films coming out now, like Creator, a lot of people talking about. That's not a franchise yet, because everything becomes successful becomes a franchise. But like that kind of idea, whereas like here's a really original, cool sci-fi film, And I know Rogue One obviously is basically a plot hole filler for the original trilogy, but excluding that small element where the kind of starting point almost felt like, it's just a really good movie that's in Star Wars, And I enjoy the sequel trilogy. I think it's heavily flawed. I think it's as flawed as the prequels, but in very different ways. But like, with Star Wars, what I'm finding is that I have to keep apologizing, not to you or to anyone listening, but like with my friends, like certain friends of mine are like, oh, I tried watching The Mandalorian, I watched episode 1, it didn't really click with me. And I'm like, I like The Mandalorian. It's a cool show. It's reinvigorated a lot of Star Wars love. But if you didn't love Star Wars, if you've never loved Star Wars in your life, you watch the movies, you're like, oh, these are cool sci-fi films, and that's it.
Yeah.
I don't think you're really ever going to find anyone who watches Mandalorian, unless they're young and it's their first kind of introduction to Star Wars. Mandalorian reignites your love of Star Wars. It doesn't create your love of Star Wars. There might be a few people that find that way, but I personally have found that either you're an original trilogy baby, you're a prequel baby, or you're a sequel baby. And those, generally, if you're one of those, then you'll like Mandalorian, or you might even love Mandalorian, you really get into it. But I feel like Andor, although it's probably the least watched Star Wars show, that's the one show I've said to my friends, I was like, don't watch Mandalorian, don't watch Kenobi, don't even watch all the sequel films, I don't care. Watch Andor. If I had like a magic wish, I would just be like, everyone watch Andor, just because I want Star Wars to be amazing that happens to be in the Star Wars universe. Not just with Ahsoka, as much as I'm enjoying it. And also, I felt that way about Rebels, to be honest with you. I think Rebels for me is my favourite piece of Star Wars content in existence. I enjoy it in many ways more than a lot of the films. I think season 1 and 2 are not as amazing, apart from the finale of series 2. But like series 3 is brilliant, and I think series 4 is fucking phenomenal. But it's not for everyone, which I get. Yeah. And I felt like could almost be that. But with Ahsoka, I'm like, this is a good show. I think if I rated it critically not as a Star Wars show, I think I'd probably be on like a 7 out of 10. I'd be like, this is good. If any of my friends who didn't love Star Wars wanted to watch it, I'd be like, it's not going to make you love Star Wars. You're not going to be, the films are okay. And then you watch Ahsoka and go, oh my God, I'm all in. Let me read all the books. Let me read the comics. And it's not going to do that to anyone. But people who already love Star Wars, they're like, this is the best thing ever. All my favorite characters are back. And it's like, I think that's part of the difference here. And I think linking to with your point with like Filoni and Favreau, they've got some great ideas. Obviously Favreau was one of the individuals responsible for the MCU, which is, hats off. And The Mandalorian is a great idea. And I do enjoy all seasons of The Mandalorian. But again, it's not necessarily going to draw new Star Wars fans in who aren't already invested in some way. And Ahsoka is like, I don't want to use the term fan service necessarily because it's used too much, but it is like every single episode is basically like, hey, here's a character you like. Boom. It's like, have they got any real relevance?
Yeah.
Not really. And like 3PO obviously was in this episode right at the start. And it's cool. I'm not going to lie. Seeing 3PO is cool. I like his character. I love Anthony Daniels. That's great. But all it did basically was go, hey, do you remember that subplot with Hera, like, disobeying the New Republic? Yeah. Don't worry about that. So the why mention it? Well, it feels like a wasted... It feels like the problem is, and this is an issue where things are somewhat building to the sequel trilogy, but you can't, because it's like it's 5 years after Return of the Jedi, so it's still 25 years ish.
Yeah,
before
they can't do too much, can they?
Yeah, and they mention in the Force Awakens that it's very loosely mentioned. There's not really been any conflict for like 30 years, so it's like you're not really going to be able to do too much with it. You're going to have like an Imperial remnant, return and Thrawn and all this sort of jazz, but it's like you can't do too much because there's too much close related to it. And this just feels like, to me, as much as I am enjoying it as a show, I'm not super hyped to watch the next episode. Like, I can't wait, I'm chomping at the bit. It's more like, there's some characters in here I think are really cool, like Baylan and Shin Hati. Yeah. And then there's characters I just enjoy seeing, like Ahsoka, like Ezra. But I'm like, this just feels like a prologue to a movie that we know almost nothing about, that is basically all the big stuff that's going to happen is almost definitely going to be saved for the movie. So this feels like it's like a prologue. It's downloadable content. It's like, if you see Ahsoka,
it is,
Heir to the Empire would be cool. But we're going to make Heir to the Empire in a way that if you didn't watch Ahsoka, everything is, in theory, still going to make some coherent sense. It's going to be individual while also being connected. And it's like, but doing that while it's also a prequel, you've just written yourself into a corner. Like, spoiler alert, Thrawn is going to die in the movie. He literally can't survive because he's not going to live long enough to live through the sequel trilogy and then be the big bad in the next thing. They're not going to do that. He's going to die in that. So it's annoying and it's frustrating because it's like, I love Star Wars and I want this, but with Andor, you had one or two characters that come up, obviously Andor and Mon Mothma and things, but everyone else is new and there are stakes. You meet a character like Nemec, you're like, I like this guy. Crunch. He's gone. That emotionally has affected me. His death more than almost anything in the new Star Wars canon, apart from, I'd probably say, Han Solo's death. It was predictable, but that was quite sad.
Yeah.
But really, I think Rebels, spoiler alert, but it's linked in this, so people would know anyway. Kanan, that's my biggest emotional moment, I say, for Star Wars, for loss. But really, apart from those two, and there's some High Republic stuff, which I love, but most people won't read that. It's like, what else is there? And it just goes to show that Andor's so well written that I can care about a character that's in two or three episodes or something. There's not even that necessarily something special about him, but his death affects me, and still does. Whereas almost every character in the show, even characters I like, before the show came out, I'm like, am I really that fussed if anything happens to them? And that's the problem I'm kind of finding.
Yeah, it's a bad thing, that, isn't it? Like your point, for me, Andy Serkis in Andor,
yes.
Did he survive to the swim? Did he survive? Like, for me, that was, because I can't swim. Fuck me, that's a brilliant moment. Sorry, I'm swearing.
You can swear as much as you want, it's fine.
For me, that episode is, I think that's top tier Star Wars. The
I'd agree.
One Way Out, fucking superb, well written. I mean, I'm like a bloody songbird. I keep saying the same tune, but well written, well structured. The music is perfect. The acting is superb. I mean, Christ, where is that level of craft in this show? Like, where you, like you said, where you feel like, fucking hell, something's going to happen to these characters. I can't swim. Oh, he can't. He's the one that spearheaded this escape. Cassian sort of giving him the urge. You have to do this. You have to tell us. You're the leader. You can do this. And then he's the one that is helpless at the end of the episode. And you're like, well, what happened to him? We don't know, because you'd never see him again.
And he has an arc. That tiny amount of time, and barely he has such an arc. You're that invested.
2 or 3 episodes, and you by the end of it, you're like, oh Christ, did he survive? We don't know, and we'll probably never know. And great, leave it at that, because obviously so many of them didn't make it. But it hammers home stakes and the oppressive power of the Empire in that series, to the point where people will die. It's war. They're taking part in a guerrilla war, which they're going to suffer heavy casualties. With this, with Ahsoka, there is literal plot armor in this series.
I want you to talk about that, the
Yeah.
Mandalorian armor, because you spoke about it in one of your reviews.
Yeah.
Delve into that.
I have absolutely had enough of Beskar armor. I think it's a scourge on storytelling. I think it's a scourge on just stakes in general. I feel like, I mean, in this episode, I might be jumping ahead.
Do it.
In fact, we are jumping ahead. But there is a point in this episode where Ezra and Sabine are with the nice, lovely turtle people who are very cute. Will make some lovely toys, I'm sure. And they get attacked by Shin Hati and the not sand people wearing red armor, and they get completely surrounded, and then stormtroopers come, and it's chaotic, it's madness, and there's a lot of blaster fire going on, and Sabine stood out in the open yet again, as she has been numerous times during a fight, and she's just being hit, blocking with her arm. I don't know how she does that. Where she's blocking them left, right, and centre. She's getting hit and nothing. And she doesn't even stumble at all anymore. You remember in the first season of Mandalorian when he would be hit a few times and actually fall back, and you'd hear physical pain from him being hit so much. That doesn't happen anymore. It's just a couple of deflections and fine, I'm okay. It's literal plot armor. No, there's no stakes with these characters anymore. And it really, really bugs me, because you need to feel some level of tension to believe in what's going on. And I fundamentally don't believe what these characters are going through. I don't believe anything they're saying. I don't believe anything they're doing. It's just another thing from the very top, where we started out so cleanly, quite crisply as well. Choreography was quite on point. There was some really slow, tense moments to start with, like standoff moments, like Western, old samurai kind of stuff. By this episode, we've turned into an editing nightmare. It's just a madness of collective, jumbling shots strung together to make it seem like something's happening when you boil it down, not really much is happening plot-wise. And everyone's fine by the end of it. No problem. We're all happy and smiley and laughing and joking. And Thrawn's just like, well, fuck you guys, I'm out of here. It's baffling. It's baffling. The plot armor is ridiculous. And it's the same for every character. It's the same for the ships. My God, Ahsoka flies through an entire minefield, a literal minefield, and comes out completely unscathed.
Seemingly with no deflector shields. And I'm like, surely she must have deflector shields. An X-Wing has deflector shields, but apparently there's no sign that it does. It looks like it did a little bit in this episode. Yeah. But in prior episodes, it's been shot and it's taken heavy damage. And I'm like, does this ship have deflector shields? Yes or no? It's quite simple. I can't tell if it does. And you'd think a ship that advanced in theory would do. But it, as you say, it doesn't seem to take any hits, really, or even shake that much. It's
ludicrous. It's ludicrous. I mean, it's it belies what the actual point of a minefield is, to be quite honest. We see all the explosion and everything, because obviously the Purgle, it's pretty much near enough the start of the episode, isn't it, after Hera's been bombarded by C-3PO's entrance, which I'll go back. I didn't like it. I really didn't like it. I thought, again, it's another one of those key jangling moments that people are going absolutely fucking batshit crazy for. All it did to me was sort of say, we're still at that point where we're not going to recast the original actors. And I think it's a great shame. I think there should be some courage there to at least try it. To at least, I mean, Christ, get Billy Ludd to play her own mother. I mean, if people knew who she was, I know obviously she's already played a character in the sequel trilogy, but get her in and just say she's playing the character her mother played. People would have it. People would have it. Get Alden Ehrenreich back in.
He was so good as Han Solo.
Yeah. I didn't like the film, but get him back in. Get him back in. He's a little bit older now. It might fit in with it. Obviously, you might have to do something maybe with his hair to make him look a bit older, but get him back in. And then hire somebody who, doesn't necessarily look completely like Mark. I mean, the guy who played the bass face for Mark Hamill in Mando season 3, when they did all the face work over the top. Get him in. He was perfectly fine. Obviously, we don't know what the voice is like, but just they need to. I think they feel like they need to have courage. If they're going to do stuff like that, then they need to have courage to push through and try it. Get these characters recast. But that's neither here nor there. But
Well, I will, just on that point, I'll say the thing is with the Heir to the Empire books, what I found about them that I actually enjoyed, because I started going through canon stuff, and for a while I was like, all I'm consuming is canon. That's all I want. And then I was convinced by a certain individual saying, look, the Legends has got some incredible stuff. So I was like, okay, yeah. I'll delve in with audio. Primarily, I listen to Legends audiobooks. And then if I like them enough, I buy them. And Darth Bane trilogy, some of the best things I've ever read in my entire life. Like God tier. I can't even get over how good they are. Like I'm a High Republic stan through and through, but I find anything I read cannot top Darth Bane books. And it's really annoying because when I hear Legends fans who hate the canon because it's Disney rather than giving ample criticisms, which is fair. People can give ample criticisms to the Disney canon, but they're like, Disney reset the canon, they suck. And it's like, well, why? It's like, because High Republic's woke. It's like, have you read any High Republic? No. And it's like, I'm never going to. It's like, well, you can't criticize it, you've never read it. But it's annoying because so many of those fans, air quotes, they're like, nothing could beat Darth Bane. And anyone who hasn't read Darth Bane goes, oh, you're just blowing smoke up its arse. But then you read it and you're like, fuck, it's so good. Yeah, and with the Heir to the Empire, is good. It's just phenomenal. And with the Heir to the Empire, the first book I wasn't as sold on when I was listening. I was like, this is okay. Heir to the Empire didn't really click with me. But when I read Dark Force Rising, I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And then His Last Command, I was like, this is amazing as well. I was like, both of those books are so good. But one of the reasons Heir to the Empire works is because you're not reintroducing the characters. You already know who all these main characters are. And the problem is, I think they're doing is, with what they've done with the legacy characters, they're simultaneously trying to be like, we need to let go of the legacy characters, while also going, you can never forget the legacy characters. And you're like, you have to make your bloody mind up. Either you move them aside and let a new generation in, or you cling to them and use them constantly. You can't have it both ways. And what they're trying to do is, they're basically, and I've said this before, they're essentially redoing the Heir to the Empire book, but with characters from Rebels. That's what they're doing. They're like, we can't have Mark Hamill come back. He's too old. Harrison Ford doesn't want to do it anymore. Obviously, Carrie Fisher's passed away. So it's like, and also their age is a massive issue as well. So it's like, we can't have all the legacy characters come back. We don't want to just redo the Heir to the Empire books. And I'm a big believer in, if you've got it in a book, don't do it the same. Do something different. So I put my hands up and say, I would rather they do that. But what it feels like they're kind of doing is going, here's essentially an abridged version of Heir to the Empire. Here's essentially the Heir to the Empire trilogy. We're cutting out chunks of lore. We're getting them big strokes, which is essentially Thrawn is really, really clever and is almost unbeatable. Yeah. And he is the heir to the Empire. The Empire's gone. He's trying to bring it back. And if he succeeds, the whole rebellion will be for nothing. That's loosely what's going to happen. And they've gone, can't do it with legacy characters, so we need to do it with these other characters. Who's kicking around? These Rebels characters we have, who I love. But what Ahsoka's doing is like, we need to reintroduce all these characters to an audience who haven't seen the animated stuff. And the problem is when you do that is like, they've all got plot armor. They're not going to, like, if they kill Ezra next episode, I'll simultaneously be incredibly surprised and hats off to them for being so ballsy, but also annoyed because I'm like, why would you have spent this much time building up to him to just kill him? So they've written themselves into a corner where it's like, I'm kind of going to be unsatisfied either way. Do you know what I mean?
It really, we really are at that point, aren't we? Because I actually do want them to kill him. I want them to kill him off, purely because I'm going back to the last episode and into this episode as well, where Sabine is just utterly selfish in her resolve, in what she's done to get to Ezra. I want it to be for nothing for her as a character, because we haven't had the most important discussion. So just prior to them being attacked by these raiders and by Shin Hati, but again, we're having this lovely conversation, lovely in principle, this conversation between Ezra and Sabine, and obviously Ahsoka contacts Sabine, while she's hiding in this, away from this minefield. We're having this wonderful conversation that should be wonderful, but it really shouldn't be, because she has not told him what she has done to get to him from the other side of the galaxy. What she's given up, what she's sacrificed. Potentially sacrificed the entirety of the safety of the galaxy, in order to get to him by giving up that fucking sphere and helping Baylan achieve his goal and then jumping on board that fucking ship. Of course, as a prisoner, but she is singularly responsible for it happening because Ahsoka said, "Get rid of it," and then she went, "Oh, there you go." Her selfishness overrid her emotions. Her desire overrid her in honest outlook on what could actually happen. Fair enough, it's a character moment, but it didn't land for me at all because of what we've seen from her in Rebels. It just didn't correlate to me whatsoever. But the most interesting thing that could have happened in this show, and I know people are going to say, well, it's Ezra down to a T, but all we've had is jokes and laughter. Ezra's been missing for however long it's been. I don't know.
A decade or so.
Yeah. He's been missing for however long that is. He's been in hiding for that length of time as well, away from Thrawn, away from these stormtroopers, away from this force that is clearly honed, a clearly honed fighting force led on by that golden god stormtrooper. Can never remember what his name, what Captain Enoch. Yeah. Clearly led by them. They're 100% with Thrawn. They would do anything for him. We've seen that. And obviously, these three witches are there as well. So he's been in hiding. Something will have changed in him as a person. Obviously, he would still have, the charisma he's got, some jokey nature and all that. But essentially, the conversation should have been, how have you got here? Why have you got here? What have you done? Because obviously he asked, did we win the war? Yes, we won. Okay. Well, what are you doing here then? Mm-hmm. What's happened? What's changed? That conversation doesn't happen. And in this episode, when they're driving along, they still don't have that conversation. Sabine briefly hints to it, like, oh, well, something's changed and whatever. And then all of a sudden he looks at the distance and sees two figures on the hill, which is Shin and Baylan. And instead of saying, who are they? He goes, oh, friends of yours. It's wrong conversation. It should be, who are they? And then she goes, well, I haven't told you everything. Therein lies some character tension, but we don't get that. We rush through it into a fight, into plot armor, jokey happiness. I'm baffled by the choices in this show. There's great opportunity to create tension, and through tension between characters, you create resolve, you create arcs, you create the teams coming together. We had it in the Avengers film. Everyone was together, then they separate because something goes wrong, because they're not honest with each other, they don't talk to each other. And then what happens at the end of the film? We get a resounding fucking battle scene with everybody joined together. It's simple writing that they've chosen not to bother with this. Instead, everyone just joins together with no issues whatsoever. Where is the tension? Where is the thought? Where's the logic? Where's the worry? There's two lightsaber wielding maniacs on a hill, and Ezra's like, "Oh, are they friends of yours? You should be going. Who are they? Are they Jedi? Where have they come from? In fact, where have you come from? Where is Thrawn? Does he know you're here? Yes, he does. Okay, why? Because I came here to find him so I could find you. Oh, good God."
It takes away his whole sacrifice. It literally takes away, and he's completely fine with it. It's like, yeah, I've been here 10 years, don't really matter.
Yeah, it makes it redundant. It's completely redundant. And then because he's not actually changed at all, really, as a character, he's still the same jokey, outgoing person. Obviously, he looks a bit more Space Jesus-y, but it's still like, it's vapid, it's empty. There's nothing to it. They're just shells of these characters that we've known from Rebels, and there's nothing to them. They're just going through the motions. That's what it feels like to me. It's just going through the motions to get to this point within this film going forward. And I've, like you were saying before about, friends asking and, what does this mean? Who is this? I've got one friend who's completely checked out, because even though they are trying to sort of, this is the relationship, this is what they're doing, he sees it as just completely thin and pointless. He doesn't care because he doesn't understand the relationships. He's not seeing, there are quite clearly something should be happening that's not happening. He's not. He can't fathom it. So he's gone, well, I don't believe it. I don't trust it. It's all gunfights and mania and no story, no structure. It's
frustrating because I think, and I did enjoy this episode. I enjoyed it more than the last episode. And there's elements I did really enjoy about it, but it was frustrating to me where, as you say, there needs to be a difficult conversation. And it seems weird that there's not been a single one in this. The closest, basically every time Baylan speaks, obviously Ray Stevenson, incredible. Baylan is the most interesting part of this whole series for me. 100%. Shin's quite interesting too. But Baylan, I'm like, I could watch him for hours. He's got so much presence. He's got darkness to him. He is a dark side user, but he's not like mustache twirlingly evil, sadistic. let's torture these people because I love torture. He's just like, I have a goal and I'll do whatever it takes to get there, including kill people. But I'm not going to just sadistically. And whenever he gets beaten, he's not like, curse you. He's just like, I failed. He's like, I failed this. What can I learn? In this episode, when he goes against Ahsoka, he's realizing she's not fighting him in full. Hu Yang shoots the flares things over him. She takes his howl line. You look at him and he goes, bollocks, I was outsmarted there. And he's got a complexity, and I like Kylo Ren from the sequels, don't get me wrong. I like how unhinged he is. But Baylan's got this center to him where he could have gone, force push, big explosion out of him. But he's just there and he's contemplating, he's thinking, how did he survive this long? I was desperate for a flashback of just seeing what the relationship is between Shin and Baylan in more detail. And it's really weird with Filoni because Rebels has so much clever subtext while also being quite obvious for certain things with kids. There's a lot of things that you get you get to see, a lot of things you get told, but also a lot of behind the scenes, like backgroundy stuff. And he does it with Clone Wars. Like, there's some weird Clone Wars arcs, like the Mortis arc, the Yoda arc, where he goes off and talks to this like 6-headed or 5-headed guardian of like the wills, like a physical manifestation of the Force. And it's like, this is bananas. What does it all mean? I don't know. You can figure it out. And it's like, that's cool. Rebels has got some of that in it as well. There's lots of Jedi, whenever they go to the Lothal Jedi Temple, and there's all this mystery, a little bit of Yoda just sprinkled in just enough. And you're like, you understand. And you feel like this is all balanced. You've got everything right. And what's weird here is every single thing with Baylan and Shin is written almost to the quality of like Andor kind of stuff, where you're like, you're getting the characters, you're not giving away too much, you're really interested by these characters, they're new, but you're already invested. What are their motives? What do they want to do? You're getting a little bit every episode, so you've got the intrigue. And all the other characters are like, don't matter. Every other character, there's no weight to anything they do. Hera defies the New Republic. What happens? Bailed by Leia. Okay, well that has no consequence whatsoever, so that means nothing. And then you've got, obviously, the show is called Ahsoka. If she's going to die, which I don't think she is to heir to the Empire if she does, she's not going to die in any episode because it's called her, so it's plot armor, so she's not going to survive. With Andor, and to a lesser extent, Mandalorian does suffer from it a bit as well, but with those shows, you've got one or two titular characters, and then everyone around them is kind of free game. And I think what Andor works so well is every episode arc, anyone can die, and there's weight to it. And people do actually die in Andor, that's the thing. And in this, you've basically got an ensemble of every character on screen is a main character. Like, we're with the penultimate episode, I don't think there's been a single character death. In the whole... we've been watching this for, how many hours? It's 45 minutes or so per episode. So that's 4 episodes, makes about 3 hours. So we're almost 6 hours in. Around that mark. So we've watched 5 to 6 hours of content, which is longer, I think longer than the entire original trilogy, or very close to it, okay? There has not been a single character death. And you're just like, how has that happened? And it's because there are essentially 4 main characters that none of them can die. And you're just like, so this is the problem I'm having with it. And I'm enjoying it because it's the fan service element of me that's enjoying it, and the sprinkling we're getting of Baylan Skoll. And there are cool moments, I don't think this is the worst Star Wars property out there. I don't think it's the best by any stretch. But I feel like if I turn off an analytical brain and I just let my love of Star Wars drag me through, I'm like, most of it, I'm like, I get to see Ezra. Yay. I get to see more Rebel stuff. Cool. I'm invested in that because of the characters before, and I want that as an individual. That's the part of Star Wars that really connects with me. But as an actual show, every action set piece in this feels like a way to not have a important, dramatic conversation. And in Andor, it was the opposite. In Andor, it was like,
Yeah, we had the difficult conversations.
all the time.
Then whatever action took place was the cherry on the cake. It was your reward. It was
Yeah.
your reward for sitting through the political turmoil.
Exactly. The heist is like, I know, like the No Way Out, the prison arc is phenomenal. Don't get me wrong, and I think it's probably the best part. But my favorite is the heist because for me, that was when the show really clicked with me. That's when there's actual loss, and like everything about the heist, all three of those episodes has so much weight to them. You get to understand the characters, a degree of their motivations. They don't overtly say. One or two characters do, but they don't overtly say, I'm in this because of this reason, this reason, and this reason. They just go, I'm in it for a reason that's not that, or I'm not in a reason for that, or I don't want to talk about it. And you have to kind of figure out by their actions what they are kind of doing. And then when the heist actually happens, you lose so many people. There's so much weight to it. It changes Cassian as a person. It means he's now a loose end for Luthen Rail, but the heist itself completely changes how the Empire perceives an uprising and rebellion, and literally changes how they govern their own laws in galactic politics, turning even more into a fascist state, which is the catalyst for why Andor goes to prison. Every single action either serves making characters more believable or adding depth to them, or it adds to the wider world. But in this, it's just like, oh man, Sabine's about to tell Ezra why we're here, but we need to save that for the finale. So let's just have some stormtroopers come in and fight them all, and then that interrupts it for enough time for Ahsoka to show up, and then we still don't have to have that difficult conversation because Ahsoka's so happy to see Ezra, and then the episode ends, and you're like, but I want the difficult conversation. I would, and as you said, I want Sabine and Ezra to be basically arguing with each other, and him, because he did it in Rebels. This is the weird thing. He constantly is in conflict with Kanan, with Sabine, with Hera. Some of the best Ezra episodes in season 3 and 4 is him going to the dark side a bit too much, him not connecting and listening to Kanan, even in the earlier series. His best moment is when he disagrees with people, and then he learns why that was the wrong thing to do. We should have had Sabine doing that, and Ezra kind of like...
it should have been the complete... It should have been the character swap.
Exactly.
It should have been him... fucking hell,
and it's just like, why, if they were arguing before the action scene happened, and then maybe one of them gets injured because they're in this, they're not concentrating enough. You know, if Ezra got like
they're not together,
wounded,
which we've had in previous episodes. You're better when you work together.
And then it's like, oh, we get to work together. But if I don't see a friend for a year, I'm just like, life is busy, but what have you been up to? How long are they on that carriage ride thing? Even if it was 10 minutes. We saw them talk for a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes. Even if it was 10 minutes, if I was Ezra, I'd be like, right, Sabine, I'm stopping this whole carriage. You need to stop and tell me what the hell is going on here. Not just, you don't really want to talk about it? That's okay. It's like, I've been stranded here for 10 years, stopping this warlord. I've thrown away my entire life to try and save my planet, and basically, in a part, save the entire galaxy. You need to tell me before we go anywhere what the hell is going on. And he's like, it's nice to see you, isn't it? Even though the reunion was really lackluster. And it's just frustrating really because I'm trying so hard. I'm trying so hard to love it because it's when I heard the Ahsoka show, I was like, this is going to be what I want. And then we got the World Between Worlds episode, which was all fan servicey, but I loved it. I was like, this is all... Me and Thomas spoke for like an hour about interpretations of what Anakin's lesson was. I like those elements. But from here, I'm like, I enjoyed the episode, but I'm like, it's becoming annoyingly predictable, and it's just so frustrating because Filoni can do it. That's probably the bit that annoys me the most, is it's literally all of the reason Filoni is held in such high regard in Star Wars is because Clone Wars and Rebels did so much for the canon, and Clone Wars is literally a 3-year-long prequel, and the majority of characters in it, we know what happens to them. So the way you add dramatic tension is getting connected to clones who are the identical beings. Everyone has a favorite clone. You get connected to those characters. Andor does something similar, and Ahsoka, they're like, let's just have everyone who he likes. It's like,
everybody gets together and sings Kumbaya after they defeat the stormtroopers. No problem, no worries. I agree with everything you've just said. I mean, the action for me in this episode, despite as well as being horribly edited together and jumpy between the different segments of what was going on. All it did was, like you say, served to hide the lack of depth between the characters, in terms of story, in terms of plot. It doesn't advance anything aside from sending Baylan off on some mysterious journey, which is the most interesting thing. Like you said, it's the most interesting thing about this. What has he felt? What has he felt within him that nobody else has felt so far? That's intriguing to me. I mean, if it leads towards, the eventual, rise of Snoke, then that's something entirely different. Obviously, that's a nothing burger character for me. But if it leads to that way, then fine, fair enough. But at the moment, I'm intrigued enough because there's something there. I mean, it says it, the bloody title of the episode, Dreams and Madness. Is Baylan being driven by some form of madness that he can't comprehend at the moment, or just a faint dream of something? It's interesting. It's almost like he's going off on his own crusade, and considering he is a character that's, right out of Arthurian legend, and, he looks like a crusader knight in the way he's dressed and the way he fights, that's more interesting. That's an element of Star Wars that I actually want to see.
Delve more into him. Let's focus a little bit on the positive. Let's just do Baylan. Let's go full on into it. Tell me everything you like about Baylan and everything you want almost from him.
To be fair, I mean, you've pretty much summed it up as best I would. Aside from the look, I think he's got a really interesting look. Obviously, Ray Stevenson, God, it's sad to think that I thought his story might be one and done at the end of this series, but at the moment it's not looking like that. It's rather sad to think that if his story is going to continue as a character, Ray Stevenson isn't going to be there to see it through. But obviously we'll have to see what happens in this next episode. But right from the off, it was the quite, pinpoint accuracy of the way he was moving, in that very first episode, the way he combats, the way he speaks. It's very softly spoken. It's direct and to the point, and yet there's this air of sort of like, haunted nature about him. He's haunted by what he's seen, and he's still looking for some meaning in himself. He's an old knight now. He's like an old Crusader knight who hasn't really found what they were sent to Jerusalem looking for in the
knight without a king, almost.
Yeah, he's just lost in this land. You could say it is, it's the Middle East, Jerusalem searching for Christ and all this. He's searching for his own sort of balance in the Force. He's not quite sure who he is. That's obvious with the orange lightsaber. He's in the middle. He's firmly in the middle. He needs direction. He feels like he initially had it with Shin Hati, but as we see in this episode, they part ways. He says, your journey is completely different to mine. She is purely on the path of chaos. She wants to win at all costs, and that's not what he wants. He's incredibly conflicted as a character. More than any of the other characters in this show. We had hints of it with Sabine being conflicted, but it's just wafer thin. We had some suggestion that Ahsoka was, conflicted as well, obviously with Anakin's lesson, but realistically we don't. I mean, Ben said last week, what was the lesson really? What did it mean? If we're having to fill in the gaps and piece it together, through discussion about what our interpretations are of the lesson, then what was the lesson actually for Ahsoka then?
Mm-hmm.
It's strange. All that's happened. Because nothing in her character or personality has changed since that episode with Anakin.
She smiles a little bit more now.
Yes, she does, yeah. I'll give you that. She smiles a little bit more, and she wears white. She's gone full-blown Gandalf. Aside from that, I don't know what's changed. Her purpose is exactly the same as it was prior to that moment, and her style of combat is the same as it was prior to that moment. So I don't know. There you go. Ezra is wafer thin at this moment. I don't really get a sense of who he is in this. Obviously, I know who he is from Rebels, but I don't get a sense of who he is at the moment. And we've had an episode and a bit, like you said. These episodes are pretty much the entirety of the length of the original trilogy, and we are no further along in finding any true depth to these characters. But with Baylan, I think it's the mystery. people crave mystery in stuff like this, in mythology, in fantasy.
Boba Fett.
We crave mystery, and with him going off, I want to go with him. I don't care too much about what these central characters are that we should be caring about. I don't care what they're doing because I don't believe them as characters. They're just cardboard cutouts to me. Whereas Baylan, who's drawn by something we can't see, I want to know what he's looking at. I want to know what he's looking for. Is that a problem with the show, that in actual fact the most interesting part is a villain who's not supposed to be the central villain, but actually is the most interesting villain in the show, apart from Thrawn as well, like I said, with his malevolence and whatever? Is that a problem? Obviously, we had Morgan Elsbeth. My God, a wet lettuce. You were saying like about characters that all these characters have survived all the way through. She should be dead. They should have killed her when Thrawn should have killed her. When in the last episode, you get the witches coming through saying, "Oh, there's whales coming through and there's a Jedi on the way." He should have killed her right there and then. Just get done with her. But no, she's just taking up space, stood there in the background looking like she's sucking on a lemon, muttering to herself as she did in this episode when the witches were pinpointing where Ahsoka's location was, just stood there in the corner muttering away. What are you doing? Who are you?
Well, here's the question. What are her motivations? We still don't know. But there's not the mystery like Baylan. She's like, I'm going to save Thrawn. Why? Whereas Baylan's like, me going towards Thrawn is like a symptom.
Yeah, it's a gateway.
I'm going there for a different reason, and I'm just using Morgan and Thrawn along the way to get to my goal. She's like, I'm going to bring Thrawn back.
He told us that as well. He said, I don't care about creating war. I just want, to change the order of things. And then when he gets there, he finally finds a purpose to go somewhere else. She's just, well, I've achieved my goal now, but nobody knows what my purpose was, and I don't know who I am either. It's ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous.
She's the most boring Night Sister. The most boring Night Sister ever on screen or in a book. God, yeah. Which is upsetting, because Night Sisters, like in the Jedi games and in Clone Wars, Asajj Ventress, I think, was one of the most interesting, complex characters in the whole of the Clone Wars. And I've got Morgan Elsbeth. She's interesting. Is she?
No.
Is she a Night Sister? Like, I know she is a Night Sister, but she is the most bland Night Sister I think I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what they're trying to do with her as a character, but it highlights, like, point blankly how thin and vapid the writing is for all these characters, because they have nothing to do of any real purpose, and yet they're just doing things to make it seem like something's happening. That's all that happened in this episode. I mean, forgive me, but all the shooting and the fighting and the bluster, everything that happens in this episode. I mean, it is a rampant episode of action. I love action as much as the next guy, but I need substance. I need purpose to guide, where the action comes from. I watched The Expendables 4. That's all action, but there's nothing else to it. It's rubbish. There has to be something underneath. It's not the 80s anymore. You can't just blow shit up and have it stick on the wall and everybody like, yeah, that's great. You need substance behind it. We had substance behind all the Star Wars stuff previously when there was action. You have to have substance, otherwise it just means nothing.
Mm-hmm. Or you do something really unique. Nothing. It's either unique action or it's got a purpose. But in this, like, I love Star Wars action. I think lightsabers, I've always said it, lightsabers are one of the coolest inventions in cinema history. They're amazing. They're such a genius idea. The sound of them, everything about them. And my issue with the sequels is I enjoyed them. I enjoy my favourite fight in the sequels is in Force Awakens with Kylo and with Rey, because it feels like they're on even turf. Kylo's actually bleeding out on the floor, and he's trying to fight people who are less experienced than him whilst kind of like dying, basically. That's interesting. The Last Jedi, you've got that whole Praetorian Guard scene. Love it. You've got, the Luke and Kylo scene. I love that bit because it's a bit different to what we've seen before. But then in The Rise of Skywalker, it's like, hey, Rey and Kylo are fighting again, and there's water this time. It's like, but this is just like the Mustafar battle with Obi-Wan and Anakin, but less of it and with water instead of lava. And the problem is, I'm thinking with Star Wars, with the action, especially with the blaster fights and things, is like, How many times can we see stormtroopers loosely hitting someone and someone killing stormtroopers with a blaster? If there's dramatic tension to it, like an Andor, where there's actual fear the Empire are going to defeat you, or if they're blocking you from doing something, there's a ticking time bomb. Like, Thrawn mentioned the time scale, but Ahsoka, as Gandalf the White she is, has no concept of, we're in a hurry, we need to do this quickly. It's just kind of like, we should probably make sure Thrawn doesn't escape, but there's no urgency. And I feel like if they ramped up, if Ahsoka was panicked, if the whole time Ahsoka was like, Huyang, Thrawn's going to go soon and we're going to be completely screwed. The Purrgil are gone, which they've not even really mentioned. There's like, the way we got here and back is gone. We have to get on Thrawn's ship. I need to go down there. We need to get Ezra and Sabine and we need to sneak onto Thrawn's ship. And I'll be like, wow, how are they going to do that? And they're like, no, we're not even going to mention the urgency. And again, with these characters, what's frustrating is my 3 top characters in this are Huyang, Shin, and Baylan. Huyang's just a droid narrated by David Tennant, and I love David Tennant, and I think Huyang was interesting in the Clone Wars, but he keeps almost saying these really interesting things like, oh, there's the story of the history of the galaxy, and you're like, that sounds cool. Yeah, I'm just going to say in a galaxy far, far away is a little nod, which is cool, but then we don't hear it, and then the rest of the episode's all about Sabine, and I'm like, I could genuinely listen to Huyang talk. He's been alive for 25,000 years. He is 25 or 28-ish times older than Yoda. And we watched him fight another droid, and I was like, I've never seen a couple of droids fight on live action a few episodes ago. That was cool and different because I've not seen that before. And the arm things come out and start hitting, and I'm like, this is quite interesting. And they're like, yeah, he's only going to be in it in sprinkles. And it's like, but he keeps dropping little bits of lore that seem really interesting. So does Baylan. Shin is she's chaotic, but you have no idea what she's thinking. Like, let's talk about Shin a little bit. Like, what, unless you want to add something about Huyang, but I want to hit Huyang and Shin. Like, what are your thoughts on those characters in particular?
Well, but it's like this little discussion we're having. It's a bad thing that we're more interested in these 3 characters than we are about anything else in the show. That is a massive red flag about just how poor this is actually coming across, really. It shouldn't be the case. We should be fundamentally invested in the central characters, and we're not, to a degree. But yeah, whenever Hyang speaks, you're interested in what he's saying because there's charisma there, isn't there? There's a distinct level of charisma, and it's the same thing with Baylan. There is something else more interesting going on that he's trying to explain, that he's trying to tell. I mean, with Shin, I think there's still a lot on the table with her. I hope that it's not a case of she's just going to be, a character that gets killed off and whatever. Because of refusal to listen or to change. They kind of hinted at, didn't they, in this episode? Obviously, when Ahsoka comes and intervenes in the fight, she forces Shin away and she says, "Come with me, I can help you." And all the other stormtroopers have fucked off. They've got the warning signal to evacuate. I mean, there you go. There's clearly a warning signal to evacuate there. So Ahsoka and Sabine should be going, hang on, they've just been told to retreat. What's going on here? We need to hurry. But no, they just stand there after Shin gets on and rides away. There's almost that little flicker of, should I go with them? And then she goes, no, I have to go as well. But obviously, she's not part of that team. She's not part of Thrawn's plans. So she's in a weird sort of middle ground, isn't she? She's literally been left alone. She's that abandoned puppy in the fucking rainforest at this point. She's without purpose. So I don't really know with her. I'm still a little bit on the fence with her as a character because I don't think they've given too much to her apart from her, constantly being a thorn in Sabine's side. But that conflict in itself hasn't really wrung anything for me either. I haven't really been invested in their conflict since the initial episode when Shin bests her completely and Sabine gets stabbed in the stomach rather hilariously. So it's difficult. It's difficult to really figure out what's going to happen with her or to really, want something from her as a character, because I do think, unfortunately, Baylan's gone his own way. We want to know what Baylan's up to. Do I really want to know what Shin's going to do? Not really, sadly. Not really. It's the same with Marok. All the theories for Marok absolutely went nowhere. It's hilarious. I love it. There aren't any theories for Shin. Funnily enough, having looked at it, there's nothing. And I think she's a symptom of other characters. Well, I say other characters of Baylan being as good as he is. Do we have any real interest in what becomes of her? I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. She's interesting enough. She's she's violent. She's overly aggressive. We got that from Baylan. He's like, your journey is not the journey that I'm on. So off you go. He's just unleashed her, hasn't he? What that translates to, I don't really know. And again, that's a difficult thing to sort of finalize with only one episode left to go.
Yeah.
Do we really see her being in season 2? If there's going to be a season 2, do we really see her being in Heir to the Empire? No. So there's a lot that needs to be finalized in this one last episode to go, because we don't know if we're getting season 2. We don't know whether this is going to factor just jump straight into the Heir to the Empire film or whatever. We don't know. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, season 2, this will happen." I'm like, are you really sure we're going to get season 2? You 100%? There's a lot to figure out for this last episode, and I think, like they did with Kenobi, I think they've spread themselves way too thin with too much to figure out with one episode to go. There is a lot of character that needs to be, character moments that need to happen in this episode coming up to make it feel like it's been earned. All these moments have been earned. There's a lot that needs to be discussed. There's a lot of fights that need to take place. There's a lot of mystery that needs to be resolved. Not least, with the Rebel Alliance as well. Are they going to show up? Are they going to turn up at Cetos, as has been hinted? Or are they just going to allow the Empire to be reformed there? I don't know. There's a lot of unanswered questions. And again, because we've spent so much time doing very little for a few episodes, similar to Kenobi, we're in the conundrum where everything's going to happen in this last episode and it'll feel rushed. With a character like Shin, she's just going to amount to nothing, which is a shame, really, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I do like her as a character, but she is limited, and you say she's in the shadow of Baylan, which is good as a plot device because it works for a character. But as you say, like, I feel like what I think is going to happen is I think Baylan is going to die. There's a while I thought maybe Shin was going to kill him. I thought it was going to be like a kind of, he reins her back a bit too much and she goes out in anger. Or maybe she's like, literally, there's a moment where Thrawn is kind of testing her and she like stabs him and he didn't expect it. Something like that. I thought, I didn't want that to happen, but I suspected that could. And now I'm like, okay, I think Baylan's probably going to die. I don't know how or why, but I suspect that. And I think Shin's going to kind of go into Heir to the Empire as the Force user on Thrawn's side. I think that's all they're building her towards. Unfortunately, I think it's going to be a bit of a waste because I think they're going to remove all the complexities from her. They're kind of going to do to her they're going to do to her what I wish they had done with Kylo Ren in the sequels. I wanted from Last Jedi, where it was building up for them to go, you can't bring Kylo back. I like Ben Solo as a character, as a redeemed version of him in Rise, but I feel like Last Jedi was trying to go, that can't happen, and then they went, no, actually it can, and it's like, just make your bloody mind up. I would rather that Kylo went full evil, unredeemable, no Palpatine, just he was the big bad, he's unredeemable, people can't always be redeemed, or he can be redeemed and he's alive and has to live with his consequences. Instead, he got the Vader easy way out, which bores me. And with Shin, I feel like they're going to go the Kylo Ren route, where it's going to maybe it's going to hint she might come back to the light a little bit, but she's going to fully go bound to the dark side. I feel like she's going to kill probably Ezra or Ahsoka or one of the main characters in this Heir to the Empire film. I think that's what her purpose is going to be. Thrawn, for all his genius, he always gets beaten by the Force, so we can't have Luke kicking around and Ezra about and Sabine around, along with all the New Republic and all this stuff, all just against basically a phenomenal tactician with a handful of stormtroopers. Like that you can't work that way. Thrawn could be the greatest person ever, but if Luke, Ahsoka, and Ezra, along with Sabine, and all the Mandalorians that are probably going to pop up as well, if they all go against Thrawn, I would argue you could be the best tactician in the world, but that's a battle you literally can't win. So there's going to have to be some balance on Thrawn's side, and I think that's all Shin is going to be. I think she's going to be the bad force person. So there's some cool lightsaber fights in Heir to the Empire, because without her, there's no bad force users. There's no one with a blood orange or red lightsaber. So I think that's what she's going to do, unfortunately. And I think this show, it feels too overcrowded, which is really annoying, because I feel it's so odd, because the MCU shows, what I've found is they felt too deserted. Like, I felt like there was like no real characters. There's some of them I did really enjoy, don't get me wrong. In the earlier stages, I really enjoyed it, but I think Secret Invasion encapsulates where you got Nick Fury, who is probably the most boring character in the MCU, I'd argue. I don't know anyone who's like, he's my favourite. People go, I love Samuel L. Jackson.
Why do I want a show with Nick Fury?
Yeah, and it's also old, boring Nick Fury, with the only stuff that was cool about him is he was like 5 steps ahead of everyone. And now you're like, no, he's not. And it's like, what is the point in him here? Secret Invasion was so weak, and it really frustrated me, because Olivia Colman completely stole the show, and then they completely underused her, and you're like, she's the Baylan of this. But, at least Baylan's actually in it a lot more than Olivia Colman was. But like, I'm finding that in the MCU shows, they've got no real consequence to anything. That's my issue, is there's no dramatic tension with a lot of them, because they're trying simultaneously to be like, you need to watch these to have an idea what's going on. I think Loki did. I know there's a lot of criticisms for Loki, which I get. I personally adored Loki. I think some of the other shows, Ms. Marvel had a lot of heart to it, and it wasn't about the story, it was about the characters, and it's quite tweeny. That's fine. I enjoyed that element. Moon Knight is his own completely separate, balmy horror thing, which I love. So it's like, when you've got Secret Invasion, it's like, this is important. This is the importance of what Winter Soldier is. But we're not going to have any of the interesting stuff. All the action's going to be weak. And also the problem what we're going to have is that because people's interest in the MCU is waning, this is going to be important, but it's going to be small enough that we can basically explain it in about 30 seconds of dialogue, which means, why would you spend 4 hours watching something that can be explained in a sentence? Because that's what's going to happen. The Secret Wars Avengers film is going to come out, and there's going to be probably a news art thing at the start, and it's going to be them recapping about the end of what we saw in Secret Invasion, that all the Skrulls are out. That's probably what's going to happen. I'm calling it now in the Secret Wars thing.
That's what they did with the Eternals and the quite literal god hanging out of the
ocean that would have destroyed the entire planet because of the ocean.
Just a news article. Oh, there we go.
Oh no, don't worry about that. It's like, okay, but in Ahsoka, it's kind of got the opposite, where it's like, the events that are being pushed in this are so important to what's going to happen in Heir to the Empire. They're like, my thought is, we've got so many great ideas this is what they're thinking. We've got so many great ideas for Heir to the Empire, but we don't want to make a 4-hour Star Wars film. So we can't have everything, we can't have the start of the film being 45 minutes of explaining the end, like what happened with Rebels, how Ezra got back, all these other things. It's kind of feel like, oh, Rebels finished, who knows what's going to happen to Ezra? And then Heir to the Empire opportunity came up, and we're like, cool, we want to do all these things. But there's a gap that we have to fill. And Ahsoka is the gap to fill that, because a lot of people haven't watched animation, so we're trying to go, here's a gap fill, here's a reintroduction to everyone in Rebels, everything with Ahsoka, although I've enjoyed it, the whole Anakin Clone Wars stuff, although I spent ages interpreting it and stuff and saying how much I enjoyed it, which I did, I loved it, don't get me wrong, it literally is showing Ahsoka in the Clone Wars in Series 1 and Series 7, and how she grew as a character. So it's basically, you don't need that. Here's her fighting Anakin, little hints knowledge that he is Darth Vader. So we've basically skipped over her whole arc in Rebels and her whole intrigue in all of Season 2 of Rebels. We've jumped over that. So we've got that whole episode was basically going, here's a short history of Ahsoka in half an hour to save you having to go back and watch God knows how many hours of Clone Wars and Rebels. And then all the other stuff is like, okay, we've got these loose ends that we set up in Rebels. Let's tile them up nice and neatly. Let's get Sabine and Ezra and everyone back. Let's get the crew back. We have to figure out how to get Thrawn back in. Let's drag him back in. The end of the episode is going to be him obviously getting back, because like there's no... I think if I was 12 and I watched this, you'd still know for empirical fact Thrawn literally has to come back.
Yeah.
Unless the start of Heir to the Empire is, or the end of this is going, we did it, we beat Thrawn, yay. And then the start of Heir to the Empire is going, Thrawn returned.
Oh,
which I doubt.
God, no.
I doubt they're going to do that. But do you know what I mean? It's becoming this thing where, although I am enjoying it because I'm a Star Wars fan, it's just frustrating because of how predictable it is and how it feels. This make me sound like such a bloody Legends EU fanboy, but I feel like this show, although I am enjoying it, and I'm glad so many other people are enjoying it, and I am, and Megan is, and all that stuff. This is kind of the problem with Disney era Star Wars. Is that we're no longer getting, like, example, I know I keep going off side tangents, but like Jedi Fallen Order works because it's not trying to connect with everything else. It's one story about Cal Kestis. Granted that it's going to be a trilogy of games, whatever.
Yeah.
But the first game is, because I've not finished Survivor yet, so I only know bits and pieces of that. I'm only probably a third, not even a quarter through the game. But Jedi Survivor is, here's just one Jedi who happened to survive, and it's his journey trying to live throughout the Empire that we haven't really seen as much. He gets a bit of a crew, but it's him mixed in, getting to see some cool old ruins and a bit more Star Wars lore. It's individual. It's not trying to prop up the sequels or the originals or anything like that. It's its own thing. High Republic works because of that. Some of the best Legends stuff, like Darth Bane, granted, it explains the prequels Rule of Two thing, but really, it's its own story. It's 1,000 years before. It's its own story about some of the characters. And with Disney-era Star Wars and with the MCU, and when you get this giant organization that spent God knows how many billions buying this thing and then needs to make the money back while also trying to keep you subscribed to Disney+, because that's partly what it is. It's like, we need people to stay subscribed, so we need to release episodic content frequently enough that people aren't just going to cancel their subscription and activate it again. We want someone to always be on it, which works because it's doing it with me. And it's so much synergy, and Disney have got 5, maybe 10 years of Star Wars content planned. We know about Dawn of the Jedi, which I'm excited for, but we know that there's going to be a Filoni movie, which we think is going to be Heir to the Empire. There's going to be another Rey film. I predicted it would be 10 years till they do that. It was not even 5 before they've decided to do that, which I'm going to try. I'm going to watch it, but they're so far ahead knowing what they're going to do. They're restricting what they're creating now, because like we can't possibly do that with that character, because in 5 years' time we're going to do this with him. We can't possibly do that with this, because the movies make all the money. So we're like, here's all these Disney Plus shows that are kind of fluffing audiences for movies. And that's the problem here. They don't stand on their own. Ahsoka, because she's an animated character, this should be a show about Ahsoka. And what it's become is a show about how Thrawn got back. And Ahsoka just happens to be involved. Ahsoka... Almost, you could take Ahsoka out of this completely, and Sabine still got to Ezra. All they need to do is literally just have it so that Thrawn leaves them on this world, but they still got there somehow, the way Sabine did, and then somehow Sabine's got a MacGuffin that Ezra's like, I've been building something to try and extend my force reach to the Purgil. I haven't been able to do it, because Thrawn's been blocking me in some way, and the Night Sisters, Dathomir, witches, whatever. They're now gone. I need one little bit of Beskar. It's a perfect conductor or something. Or I need a conductor. Oh, I've got a bit of Beskar. Here's a device. I can communicate with the Purgil. I can come back. So that's the only reason Ahsoka's in it, because Sabine's gone to a world and she managed to follow and get them back. If you take Ahsoka out, she hasn't actually done anything. And that's the problem. Ahsoka in her own show is almost like Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yeah,
she's just a passenger for everything. She just experiences it all and doesn't really have any lasting impact. Yeah, the outcome would have been the same if you take her out of the battle with Baylan. He would have just been sat there, and then Sabine would have just turned up, and the same conversation would have happened. Oh God. It's so thin. It's so thin, it's making me thin. God.
And I'm trying, I always say on the show, and with my Star Wars all my Star Wars content, I'm always saying, I try and be positive where I can. There's enough negativity about Star Wars. A lot of the negativity around Star Wars is unfounded. It's just people hating on it because it's Disney for no reason. But the problem is, there are valid genuine criticisms one can have of Disney, and I try my best to be positive, and I don't want to shit on anyone else's opinion. If you're loving, if you think Ahsoka's the best thing in the world, I wish I could feel the same, in all honesty. I wish I could think this is the best thing ever. There's lots of little notes, Anakin in that hologram thing. That was cool. He mentioned Ventress. That's cool. He did a Clone Wars reference. But putting in a few lines of dialogue here and there to reference something I've seen, that's amazing. Basically referencing better content is...
exactly.
To make me enjoy this content more. Like Ezra, I like Ezra. I think he's really interesting. I'm intrigued to see what he's going to do. Like, with him not using a lightsaber. Interesting in concept, but the problem is, he's like, I don't need a blaster. I'm just going to use the Force. And I go, he's going to do some crazy Obi-Wan stuff. No, he uses the Force to push people a bit, and then he uses one of the Stormtroopers' blasters anyway to shoot other. And I'm like,
it's ridiculous.
Why don't you just take a gun?
The only thing that, as soon as he said, no, no, you have it. I literally thought, it came to me like a fucking epiphany. It hit me like lightning. As a Hook reference there. I immediately saw that scene in Attack of the Clones. This weapon is your life. Do your fucking homework.
You know why he doesn't, though? You know the real reason why he hasn't got his lightsaber? Because storytelling-wise, he's so beyond Shin and Sabine. What we saw him do in season 4, season 4 of Rebels, he took out way more stormtroopers in the. He was doing triple. There's a bit where Hondo Ohnaka sees him after not seeing him for a year. It's is that Ezra? He's doing a triple backflip, slicing through 10 stormtroopers with a flip,
he's
throwing his lightsaber. Yeah, and you're like, how do we weaken him? Because Ahsoka's meant to be the powerful one, even though Ezra's seemingly almost as powerful. So Ahsoka needs to be the powerful one with a lightsaber to come and save them. So how do we make Ezra basically on even ground with Shin, is disarm him? Because if he had his lightsaber,
we can't figure out a reason. Yeah,
exactly. And so again, it's one of those things where Ezra not having a lightsaber, that sounds cool in concept, but realistically, you're only doing it because if he did against Shin, he would destroy her. He would easily beat all those people because he would deflect every single blaster bolt back. There would be no dramatic tension. And then you'd be like, now we've just got Shin and then again, Ahsoka is useless. So how do you make Ahsoka valuable?
Yeah.
She has a lightsaber because Ezra just randomly decides in a life or death situation, he's been stranded for 10 years, he, for no other reason than saying, the Force is my guide, he could have even just said, you've got a bet, I've seen I've had visions, I've seen you have a better chance of survival if you have this lightsaber. And all it would mean is Shin going for her, knocking her down, and her pulling out the lightsaber and doing one final save of her own life with it. But they don't. They go, nah, she only uses the lightsaber once when there's a thug that hits her a couple times, and then she just jabs him.
It's the primary weapon, and she's not using it as primary weapon. She's just as useless with her blasters in this series. Man. I mean, it would have been a much more interesting thing to see Ezra, have a lightsaber for the first time in 10 years, activate it, and be that person, be restraint, show the restraint against Shin. Maybe she goes all in against him. She never met him before, but she goes all in because she wants to kill him. And then he completely disarms her. And then you could still have that same conversation that Ahsoka does. Maybe Ahsoka comes and sees, from a distance what's going on. But it's Ezra that has the conversation with her, says, what is this anger you've got? I don't know who you are. You don't know who I am. Why are you doing this? Let's talk. And then maybe Shin has the same reaction, takes a step back and then disappears off like she does.
And then Ahsoka comes down.
Yeah. It's more interesting because Shin would then have been in conflict with somebody who's much more powerful than her, that she doesn't know, and she realizes that she is not the person she thinks she is, or that she's been taught to be. Maybe she does go off. Maybe she does find Baylan and kill him.
But that could add more stuff to Sabine. Because if Sabine, and I agree, what you've just said is amazing. And if Ezra disarms Shin, and then Sabine pulls out a blaster and says, we need to kill her, and he's like, no. And Sabine's like, what are you talking about? She's dangerous. And then they have a conflict, and that's what gets Shin to escape. Or Shin activates the blade and severely wounds one of them. Then it's there's a conflict still between Sabine and Ezra. And then she's like, why don't you trust me? And he's like, because you've not told me anything, and you've just come out of the blue and not talking about what's going on, what is happening. And then Shin's gone then after that. And then she's like, look, Ahsoka's dead and it's all my fault. And he's like, what? And then Ahsoka lands, and then she's like, oh no, and Sabine has done all these wrong decisions.
Yeah.
She can resolve. No, none of that. Ezra's just not going to use his lightsaber, so it's an even fight, and he tries to fight someone with a lightsaber. Cool moment when she tries to swing at him and he stops it. And then she just, force pushes him into a wall, and he's just out of it.
We cut away from that as well. When he does the block, we cut away from that, and then we come back at the end of that bit of a fight. We don't even see the rest of it. It's all happening off screen. It bothers me, and I've had this discussion many a time with Spider-Dan, of Spider-Dan, the Secret Wars. Like, if when we're talking, if we're actively trying to make it work by creating our own dialogue, our own scenes, then that shows fundamentally that the show just isn't working as a story, with its writing, with its set pieces, with its characters. If we're coming up with something that we sort of sit there and go, this sounds better, why have they not done this? Maybe they should have done that. It would have worked out better this way. That just 100% nails on the point that we've sort of alluded to in this, that it ain't all right. It ain't all good. There's a lot wrong with this. There's a lot that doesn't make any sense. There's a lot that just is far too empty and meaningless. All I've got at the moment is pure apathy for this at the moment. Like I said, I've been on the cusp. I've been flying down, not flying down. I've been slowly, yo-yoing up and down to the point where the yo-yo, I've got nothing in it. The string's loose now. It's at the bottom. I mean, unfortunately, I haven't done my own little review yet. But this discussion has kind of made this episode worse for me, to be quite honest. Same. It really has, because we're talking through it. We're pulling little threads, and this is the thing that I do, and I apologize because I can see in your face, like, this is how I work with my reviews. I'll watch something and something will stick out. There'll be that thread on your shirt, and you go, "Oh God, hang on, I'll pull that," and before you know it, your arms fell off. And not just your shirt arm, but your entire arm, and then your legs fall off. And that's what happens with me when I'm looking at things like this. Something stands out, doesn't hit right. Like I've said with Sabine in the last episode, not having that difficult conversation. It's wrong. She's selfish, but a lot of people aren't seeing that. They're seeing it as, oh, it was a wonderful, beautiful moment. They got back together. No, pull that critical thread just a little bit. You don't have to be overcritical like I am. You don't have to be over-analytical like I am. But if you just look, that doesn't quite sit right, the thread starts coming away, and then the structure falls around, all of it just falls apart around it. I mean, it's such a difficult thing. I don't know what's going to happen in the next episode. Your idea of maybe Shin finding Baylan and taking her frustrations out on him and killing him as he's discovered something really important within the Force. Maybe it is more dark side power, or maybe it is like a pure revelation, from this different galaxy, a different power entirely. Maybe she just take that. Maybe she does become the central focus of Thrawn's attack as a dark side user. That's interesting. I'd buy into that. And to be fair, it would solve I'm hesitant to say problem, but it would solve the unfortunate issue that Ray Stevenson just isn't with us anymore. And that's a damn shame, because I would quite easily watch him much more than what we've got. So that to me is interesting. I'd be pleasantly surprised and intrigued if that is where we go with it. That she finds him, and having been defeated and been left alone to face 3 Force users, 2.5 Force users. I would very much like to see her take her frustrations out on him. Maybe she does best him. It's the old Sith adage, isn't it? The apprentice beats the master. There we go. Her anger will take over everything, and he holds no anger. So that's how she'll win. It'll be pure anger, and he doesn't have that. He is very much a focused individual, isn't he? He is very much in the middle. So yeah, I can see that happening, and that would be interesting. But as for the rest of it, like you say, Thrawn's going to escape. He's going to go through the other side of the galaxy. Of course he is. How have they not done that already? Don't know. Those stormtroopers are really taking their time loading that cargo. But again, I said it in my review last week. We don't know how much time is passing. We don't know how much time is passing on this world because the sky never changes color. It's all the same. It's never night. It's never day. It's just a murky sort of dusky kind of time, isn't it? So yeah, there's a lot of a lot of things that need to be answered that probably won't be answered. There's a lot of questions about how certain things have come to be that probably will never get answered. We'll just have to see, won't we?
We'll get a book. I'm basically. It sounds bad, but like, again, I'll consume all Star Wars for the foreseeable future at least.
So will I. So will I.
I'm hoping that every now and then you get an Andor or you get a Rebels or things like that, and you know, I think it's one of the things you say there, which is about the pulling the thread, is which I find with these discussion shows is that with certain episodes, I find that they're quite. I can argue a point, and you know, I've been a staunch defender of Star Wars. I somewhat deem myself a Star Wars apologist, especially for the prequels. I think the prequels, controversially, I think they have the best plot of any Star Wars films, but presented in the worst way. I think the complex nature, and I think that George Lucas had a clear vision of maybe not as much for Phantom Menace, but like with Attack of the Clones, and which is most people view it as the worst. I enjoy Attack of the Clones, but like leading into Revenge of the Sith. All the stuff that happens in Phantom Menace and mainly Attack of the Clones is basically foreshadowing what happens in Revenge of the Sith, and everything in Revenge of the Sith, why Obi-Wan goes off to fight Grievous, is so Anakin can stay and fall to the dark side without the one thing connecting him back. Mace Windu never trusted him. He's always had a problem with him. There's all these little threads, and although the dialogue is weak at times in the prequels, and there's certain parts, and you're like, why the hell is this in here? The main beats of the plot, for me at least, work. And I feel like the main big events that occur, I stand by Order 66, is one of the best things in all of Star Wars. It's brutal, it's a gut punch, and it works thematically, it works in the context of the story, and it makes sense of the whole Darth Vader's fall. He's gone too far, he can't pull back. Loads of elements of the prequels I love, which is why I can normally, for the majority of criticisms of the prequels, if I just say, look, I know the script was crap at certain points, certain actors needed more direction, and Jar Jar's the worst. If you strip back those three major points, I can normally defend the vast majority of criticisms with elements of the plot in the prequels. With the sequels, I can to a degree, but Rise of Skywalker, there's just certain plot choices which are just very hard to defend in certain elements, but I still think there are ways in which one can defend it. Someone actually said on Twitter that the majority of criticisms people have for the Rise of Skywalker, you can actually apply those to Return of the Jedi. One of his arguments was someone goes, yeah, but somehow Palpatine returned, and he goes, Death Star 2, never explained, it's just in the crawl. And I'm like, it hurts me, but that's a very good point. So there's threads, I think, that in the main films, they're a bit more compact, and although it's frustrating and you can tug at little parts, the big things that happen, it's harder to criticize specifically. It's like little details around them fizzling. But I feel like in this, it's different. I feel like in this, it's just, the more I delve into it, the less things make sense. And I really want these shows, you know, discussion shows, I want them to be both positive and negative. You know, I think there is always good and positive in Star Wars. But it's just very hard for me because I'm actually finding, if I'm truly honest with myself, I want to see the Heir to the Empire movie because I love watching Star Wars movies. I love the event of going to the cinema and having a big thing happen on screen, even though I loosely know the plot. I mean, Rise of Skywalker, we knew Rey was going to survive. You know, Rey was going to be in it till the end. That's fine. But what was going to happen along the way? Who knew? It was quite weak. But in this, with knowing so much of what's going to happen with Heir to the Empire, my genuinely thing I'm the most excited for the future after this series, if Ezra survives, is I want to see what they do with Ezra. I think he's going to die in Heir to the Empire. I hope he doesn't. I'm interested by him as a character. I think even if this show hasn't provided him with the most intrigue, he still has potential. But if I'm truly honest with myself, the thing I'd be the most excited for that comes out of this is if they announce a book about Baylan and Shin. That would be, or an ongoing 30-issue series of Baylan Skoll from the start all the way through, like every 5 issues is like an arc, almost like what Andor does. What he was like as a Padawan, his experience in Order 66, what he was like in the time between Order 66 and the Galactic Civil War, what he was doing in the Galactic Civil War, obviously where he met Shin in a way, and then what led him to the events in Ahsoka. I am genuinely more excited for the concept and idea that we're going to get a comic series or a book about Shin and Skull, more so than the Heir to the Empire film, which shouldn't be the case. And it's so really upsetting to me saying that with all this Star Wars stuff around me and how much I adore Star Wars, and I've got tattoos and everything, and I'm like... And that's the thing. Yeah, exactly. I'm more excited about a book of a spin-off to characters that I'm probably going to know the fate of than I am for the next big Star Wars event.
Yeah.
And that's just upsetting.
It is. It really is.
Man, well, is there anything else? And also, I was honestly, with everything you've been saying, I've been in agreement. You know, although I have. Again, I will say to everyone listening, I enjoyed this episode. When I was watching it, I was enjoying myself. I was having fun. You know, I think the action scenes could have been better, definitely. But it's just when the episode finished, I was like, okay, that was nice. But now, after I'm looking back on it, I'm like, unfortunately, the feelings get undone to a degree with my cognitive want. And the problem is, again, this show, I'm not going to rewatch Ahsoka.
No, absolutely
what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewatch on YouTube the Anakin stuff from a few episodes ago. I'm going to rewatch a few Baylan fights, and then I might even watch a little bit of supercutting of like Baylan's dialogue and things. Depending on what the finale's like, maybe. But that's what I do with Kenobi. I'm probably, until maybe I have kids and maybe I'll feel differently, probably never going to watch the whole Kenobi series in one go again. There are a couple of characters I thought were cool. There were elements I think were interesting, but 90% of what I enjoyed about Kenobi is Vader in the village, Vader dragging Obi-Wan through fire in that interaction, and then Obi-Wan beating Vader. You know, they're the 3 bits. And I'm always one when people say, you know, when they watch an Avengers movie or whatever, they go, oh, I just watched these scenes on YouTube. And I'm like, you should want to watch the whole film as a package.
Yeah.
There's no parts of the prequels or of the original trilogy, or to be honest, the sequels. I'd say Rise of Skywalker for me is the weakest. But even that, I think the first half of that movie is actually really good. So there's no Star Wars movie that I want to just watch parts of. I want to watch the whole package, because even if there are moments that speak out to me the most, there's connective tissue as thread along the way. Solo's not the best, but there's enough snappy dialogue, fun little moments, Lando in it, that sprinkled throughout the whole film that makes me want to watch the whole film in one go. With Ahsoka, there's not. If I take away the action scenes,
what else is there?
Exactly. And that's really upsetting, because I thought this was going to be my new Rebels. I've watched Rebels now 2 or 3 times all the way through. I still love it. I'm going to rewatch the Clone Wars with Math and Dave soon. We're going to watch the Clone Wars movie, which I hate, and then we're going to watch all... It's terrible. I think it's the worst piece of Star Wars content in existence, in canon at least. But like, I'm excited to watch the Clone Wars as a whole, because I'm okay with putting up with the weaker arcs because there's so many highlights. But for me, I don't think any of the Star Wars series, even Mandalorian, like, I enjoy The Mandalorian.
I won't rewatch them.
I've rewatched the odd episode. I rewatched the Ahsoka episode's cool. I've rewatched the finale of season 2. That's cool.
Yeah.
But aside from that, and rewatching before doing a discussion show, I'm not going to sit down and go, I'm going to watch all of The Mandalorian again. And I've not felt that with any of the MCU shows. I've not felt that with, apart from Loki, because I'm a sucker for variants and stuff, even though that wasn't really used that much. Yeah. But like, Loki is the only MCU show I'd do it with, maybe Moon Knight. And then with the Star Wars live action, I'm like, not really. Andor, me and Megan recently started rewatching Andor, and I'm like, this is phenomenal television, and I could keep rewatching this.
Yeah.
Not for Ahsoka, and that is so heartbreaking.
Yeah, that parallel is exactly the same with us here. Like, prior to Endgame, we've rewatched the entire the MCU up until that point multiple times. Now, post that, because there's so much content we don't like, we won't rewatch that stuff. I can honestly say, of all the TV shows, the MCU TV shows, I won't go back and rewatch them. I won't. Fair. The films, the only one that we have rewatched is No Way Home.
I was going to say, the Spider-Man one is like God tier, because it's an amazing Spider-Man movie. And I enjoyed... I enjoyed Doctor Strange too, but I'm not clamoring. When I watched the film in the cinema, certainly the MCU films, I was like, I love that. I cannot wait to rewatch it.
Can't wait to get on Blu-ray. Can't wait to get on 4K.
Yeah, and now I've got it.
Haven't done any.
I've got Doctor Strange 2. I loved that film. It's flawed. I loved it. Haven't rewatched it because I'm like, I want to watch it, but I don't. I want to watch it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I'm getting that feeling with these Star Wars products. Like, to me, I won't rewatch the sequels. I won't. I don't have them. I don't own them. And it's what happened with Marvel films up to Endgame, and then No Way Home was like, right, I've got all these films. I've not been buying them. Yeah, they're on Disney Plus, but I've not been watching them there either. I've not been buying them because I don't like them. I've got to that point where I won't just buy it for the completionist. I've moved on from that now.
Same.
Obviously, I'm still pretty much a completionist with lightsabers and whatever, but, can't even afford all of them, to be quite honest. But I've moved away from it because I'm thinking, time I've got, if I don't like the content, I'm not going to go back and rewatch it. Therefore, I'm not going to be buying it. And it's happening with these Star Wars shows. If Andor's released on 4K, I will buy it. 100%. I will buy it.
I'm with you there.
I will buy it. No problem at all. Straight off the bat, I will buy it day one. They've recently put off a pre-order all the Mando shows. They've pre-ordered. You can get them 4K Steelbook editions. No, I don't want to get them. I really love the first season of The Mandalorian. Really love it. I've got Mando's helmet there. I've got Bo-Katan's there. I've got few action figures, all of the bloody the Mandalorians. I've got them all, but that's because I love the Mandalorian culture. I love the feel of it. But with season 2 and season 3, I fell out of love with it because it became really, really thin, and like with this, I won't go back and watch it. I won't go back and watch it because I didn't like the back end of season 2 and I didn't like season 3. So pretty much with, I liked The Force Awakens. I initially liked The Last Jedi, but then I rewatched it at home, and again, I did that thing. There was a piece of thread there. I pulled it, and then, God, it all fell apart. And then I didn't like The Rise of Skywalker. So because I'm not a completionist, there's no point me owning those 3, because I won't go back and watch The Force Awakens because I know where it goes up to. I know where it leads to. I know what the end game is. And it's the same with this. I know what happens in this. I won't rewatch it. I know what becomes of The Mandalorian. I won't rewatch it. I know what happens in Moon Knight. I know what happens in, WandaVision. WandaVision's perfectly fine, but in the grand scheme of things, it's part of something that doesn't speak to me anymore. As a series, as a whole, it just doesn't speak to me. My biggest worry is, because I am such a big Star Wars fan, just look behind me. It's not complete. There's a lot of stuff that's not on the wall, but my worry is that I'm, not part of this journey anymore. But I want to be, and that's the thing. I want to be. There are people out there on Twitter. I think somebody posted something that might have been a direct reaction to me without sort of tagging me in it, saying, if you don't like the content, somebody I follow who follows me, if you don't like the show, why don't you stop watching it? It's not that simple, because I want to like it. I want to enjoy it because it means everything to me as an event. It's part of my life. I'm bloody sat in a room encased with it, like you are. That's why I'm consuming it, and I will air my frustrations because it means that much to me, and it always has done. It may not speak to me, it may move beyond me, but I want to watch it in the veiled hope that my little one may get some enjoyment out of it. And she does. She's been watching that Young Jedi show on Disney Plus.
It's surprisingly good. I've watched a few of them. It's actually, for that age show, I was like, it's actually quite cool.
Yeah. It's on repeat. It's on repeat with Bluey, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, you name it. It's on repeat because there's like 5 or 6 shows that she watches, and each morning we pick a different one, and she will sit there and watch it, and it's great. And that's one of those shows. Initially there were only like 4 or 5 episodes, and we were like, oh, is that it? And then they've released more, haven't they? So, there's hope in that regard, but fundamentally, I think if there just needs to be a bit more meat to it. We got it with Andor, so why are they not doing it with this? Just why? Just why? It's there. You could have done it with this show. They could have added, I don't know, 4 or 5 more episodes just to really flesh out those character moments, have those conversations that we talked about, really give it some depth and meaning. Nobody would have minded. Nobody would have minded an extra 4 or 5 episodes if you put one episode as being, it doesn't have to necessarily be the exposition episode, but one episode that really speaks to you, that really delves into what the characters are thinking, what they all mean, what the purpose is, what they're thinking. Really set all the pieces on the table and move from there. Have a long conversation episode that speaks volumes, and then give you the reward of the action episode, like we had with Andor. Was that too much to ask? No, I don't think it was. I think it is just literally a case of they wanted to get it out there, and they've put it out there, and I don't know what the result will be, to be quite honest. I've not even looked. I mean, it would be interesting to see what the viewing level is for this, to be quite honest, just to see how it's tracking with audiences. Because aside from those people that just throw crap against the wall on YouTube and whatever, the negative comments and negative reactions, some of them are quite funny, but people saying, "Oh, the viewership is so low." Well, I would like to see the actual proof. I'd like to see the proof to see, is it actually speaking to people? Is it not? Are we all wrong? Are we all missing the point? Am I missing the point? That's what I want to know. I want to see these figures and see where it's correlating. Aside from reviews, I don't really read other people's reviews, to be quite honest.
I don't before these conversations because I don't want to take my thoughts.
No. So,
it's tough. And you've touched upon, we'll start to wrap up, but there is something you touched upon there which upset me again, because I collect steelbooks as well. I've got right next to me. I've got lots of Blu-rays of certain films that come out, and I see it. Like, I've seen Barbie and Oppenheimer. I think they're both phenomenal in different ways. I want to own them. Oppenheimer less so, because I'm like, when do I want to watch a 3-hour-long biopic about Oppenheimer again?
Yeah, I won't watch it again, to be quite honest.
Maybe once again in my life in like a decade. But where Barbie, it's a comedy film, you could just watch that over and over again. And like when I eventually have kids, like I'm like, part of the reason I'm buying stuff now is when it's not Disney, because it's like, when it's not Disney, it's a bit static where it's going to be on streaming. And every now and then I'm like, I really fancy watching this film. And then it's just nowhere. And now I have to pay like £4 to watch it on Amazon Prime. And I'm like, if I just bought that for £6, if I watch it once more in my life, I've made my money back. So certain films I just buy when they come out. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I buy all the Spider-Man movies because A, I love Spider-Man. And B, because of Sony and Disney and blah, I don't know where they're going to be. And I know for a fact with Into the Spider-Verse and Beyond the Spider-Verse, across rather, I enjoyed them so much, and I don't need to watch a billion other shows to enjoy them. I can just pick up that and watch it. There's certain other movies that I watch in the cinema, and like, I could watch that again, and I want to be able to show people that film if they haven't seen it. And for the rest of my life, I want to know I can just pick up that and watch it. With the Star Wars 11 movies, like, even though there are weaker ones, they're comfort. I like watching them all. I can do that and not pay as much attention. I want to show them my kids one day, and I enjoy the sequels as well. But when the Mandalorian Steelbooks came out, I was like, oh, that's cool. But then I was looking at them and going, do I really want to spend basically about £60 to own something that I can watch on Disney Plus, but I've never had any desire to rewatch ever? And they've been out for years. I've rewatched the sequels. I am not the biggest fan of Rise of Skywalker, but there's more in Rise of Skywalker that makes me want to watch it than in a lot of The Mandalorian, which is weird, because I would rate Mandalorian higher than Rise of Skywalker in a lot of quality of it. But I think this might be series. I think this might be the issue here, because I think if the Obi-Wan series was a movie, I know someone edited it online and made it into a movie and things, but I'm like, if they made that into a movie, maybe, and shorter, maybe I would want to watch it. Or with Andor, as you say, I want to own Andor. I never want to be in a position in my life where if I fancy watching the No Way Out arc or the Heist arc, I want to be able to just go, you know what I fancy this Sunday afternoon? Megan, let's have a couple drinks and just sit back and spend an hour and a half watching some incredible Andor stuff. I want to be able to own them. And if they come out in Steelbook, I'll buy them. And I looked at Mandalorian and I was like, I think the only reason I even am considering, which I haven't done, I'm not going to, the only reason I was considering buying them, the only reason, is because I've got the films in Steelbook, and as that completionist part of me, it feels like I should, because I'm such a Star Wars fan, I should own them. Not because I want to, I feel compelled that I should. Whereas the High Republic, for example, even some of the weaker novels, I've really enjoyed. And I will probably reread them at some point because I really enjoy them, or I want other people to read them, or my kids, or whatever. But there's not that with the Disney series. Certainly not with any of the Marvel series, even the ones I've really enjoyed. I'm like, Loki, I was kind of tempted. I was a little bit tempted. But then I was like 30 quid for a series is a lot. And it's like a subscription to Disney Plus for a month is like half of that. And I'm like, am I really going to want to rewatch Loki, series 1, 3 more times in my life when I don't have Disney Plus? Probably not. Maybe once more. Maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm with you there. And it's upsetting. And as you say, like I'm much more positive about Star Wars in a lot of ways. But, you know, I think a lot of people are in the same boat as you where they're so desperate to want to watch it. And I know I've seen so many people online criticize people who are saying, why isn't this as good as Andor? And it really bothers me because it's like, I'm not expecting the show to be as gritty and as mature as Andor.
No.
I just want it to be as well thought out. And I want Andor is so hard to criticize. With all the discussion shows with Andor, there was not a time where anyone was like, why the hell is this person doing this? Or why have they not done this? Apart from a time where if we raise that question in the following episode, we get an answer to that. That's the only time. For 12 episodes of Andor, which is longer than any Star Wars live-action series, there's no major plot questions or things that are inconsistent or a character doing something because the plot demands it, as opposed to it being their own, you know, desire. And that's an issue with Sabine. She's just doing stuff because the plot needs them to go get Thrawn, even though her whole arc in Rebels was literally about not doing things for your own personal stuff, is doing what's right for the greater good. And that's the frustrating thing. I want to love it. And there's a lot of Star Wars I still love. But is it going to continue? And that's the question. So is there any final things that you want to say with Star Wars before we wrap up? If that, and then we'll get into plugs, but any final thoughts on the matter, and then we will close the book on the penultimate episode of Ahsoka.
No, I don't think I have any final thoughts. To be fair, I think we've covered quite a lot there, haven't we?
We have.
We've covered a hell of a lot. It's been a really great chat.
I agree.
Not just about the episode. In fact, we've talked a great deal about other things surrounding it, haven't we? So it's been a great discussion. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for
really great.
Plug away then, good sir. Tell people about your content and things. Let them know. I'll put it in the description, but let them know.
Oh, well, yes. So obviously I'm Angry Andy Reviews. Primarily I operate on the old YouTube. Some stuff's been working really great recently. I've had a lot of traction. But yeah, you can also find me on Twitter at Andy_review, and that's where a lot of my lamentations seem to reside. But yes, primarily those are the two areas I work from. Reviewing mainly at the moment Ahsoka. I've been looking at some of the Hasbro stuff that's been going on as well. They seem to be churning out some big toys there that I'm trying to convince Spider-Dan to buy because I ain't got anywhere to put them. But yeah, so that's pretty much what I do. A few reviews as well. There's some coming up that I need to review. So come and check it out. Come and like and subscribe to the channel. And thank you very much again. It's been great.
No worries, it's been quite cathartic.
It has. It really has. I need a stiff whiskey now as well.
I was thinking that actually. Yeah, I mean, a nice whiskey would do well. Whiskey and Andor, that's what I want. That's the show, that Andor Series 2 and The Acolyte. I'm hopeful for The Acolyte because it's separate enough from everything else. So I'm like, maybe there'll be character deaths. And I'll say my final comment on this, I think, one thing that would maybe even save Ahsoka, or would have done, is... we had Hu Yang. I want to know more about Hu Yang, definitely. But, with each character, we got a tiny bit of it with Hera, but not enough. But, why not have Ahsoka have just a few members of a crew? that maybe there were people who helped her find Hu Yang. We get one throwaway line dialogue. You get a little bit into those characters, and every time she goes against Elsbeth or Baylan Soll or something like that, one of those characters dies. And you just have it where there's a group of people behind her who want to help rebuild the Jedi Order. Lor San Tekka was a member of the Church of the Force. He supported the Jedi. He was not Force sensitive in any way.
Yeah, why
he died?
Why can't you just have a young him on the crew?
Yeah,
sees it all.
Exactly, and that'd be cool. That would link in with the sequels. That'd be an interesting thing. But or just any characters who like believe in the ideals of the Jedi, that want the Jedi to succeed and are along for the ride to kind of help out Ahsoka.
Enough that they'd put their life on the line.
Exactly, and then if they die, and then Ahsoka feels responsible and guilty, and she carries that weight, and she then has her own inner turmoil. I want it to be, there's more surrounding characters. One of the best things about Star Wars is the term a glup shitto, a random side character that doesn't mean anything necessarily, but you connect with on a little level. Yeah. The original trilogy is filled to the brim with them, the bounty hunters. Yeah. We didn't know anything about them. Boba Fett was a key thing of this. He barely had any speaking lines, barely did anything really, but people clung to him. And you have these characters. There's characters in the original trilogy, all these different pilots and things that people knew about and you had some degree of connection to, and then they died. And it felt like the rebellion was losing in Empire because people were dying. And I think that in this show and in some of the other Star Wars live action things, with The Mandalorian, where they all have Mandalorian armor, so they're all invincible, and every character is so smart and intelligent. Greef Karga, cool character. He's probably never going to die though, unless it's the finale. All these characters, even IG-11, he's not dead, he's back. Exactly. So it's like the character death that meant something in Mandalorian Series 1, they ironically can't let the past die. And for me, as the last thing I'll say is my fix for it is add more characters in, but let some characters die. Just because you like a character doesn't mean they have to live. This happened to Obi-Wan in the first film. Granted, he lives as a Force ghost, granted. But like Yoda dies. I know he lives as a Force ghost, but he does. There are characters that genuinely die in Star Wars. In the prequels, Qui-Gon Jinn, one of the coolest characters in Star Wars, he dies and he doesn't come back. There's a tiny bit of him in Clone Wars, tiny bit of him in Kenobi, but he's gone. Yeah. We need more characters like that. And last thing, in High Republic, there's a certain character in the first book, and something very bad happens to him. You connect very greatly with this character. Something very bad happens to him. Something even worse happens to him in The Rising Storm, and he doesn't come back. And that is a character that I'm constantly like, I want more from them, but I can't. Yeah. And you need characters like that. You need a character who is taken too soon. Yeah. And when you've got 10 characters and they're all invincible, it means there's no dramatic tension. So
it's weightless, isn't it? It's ultimately weightless. I agree. There should have been, peaceful fanatics of the light side that, are there to try and do something and change something, and that would have informed the episode with Anakin if you had that, because that's what it's about.
Yeah,
her like losing people in war. Christ Almighty, it would have informed that episode completely. It would have made more sense. It would have meant something to do with the lesson.
Yep,
you're a soldier. People die. You've just rewritten the show, and we shouldn't have to do that.
And Hera has
rewritten the show. She should have had people dying at her hands.
Hera has some people, and when they die, when that hyperspace thing happens, and they die, you go, "Oh man!" I mean, but they had no real dialogue. So if they just had 2 minutes of them conversing and being like, "Hey, it's another routine mission. Oh, it's going to be boring, like that one on Xandar or something." That's from Guardians or whatever. Yeah. But like, just a little bit of back and forth of this camaraderie, like we had in Star Wars: A New Hope. And then when Biggs Darklighter dies because he's a friend of Luke's, it means something. Everyone knows the name of Porkins. He barely says anything in the whole film. He doesn't even do anything good. Everyone knows him. The characters, when Hera gets shot by the electric zappy thing, when those characters die, you even feel it. Fighter pilots dying at war. Yeah. But we don't get enough of that. And Carson Teva, he's cool. He's not going to die, apart from maybe in the film. Again, every character they introduce is like, he's cool enough. Let's let him live forever. So that's
so we can release action figures and more helmets for me to buy.
Yeah, so that's a frustrating thing. But I'll say thank you so much again, Andy, for coming on the show. It's been delightful chatting with you about this show. Let's hope that the finale is amazing and brings it all back to a degree. But it may not. It probably won't. It's going to be, unfortunately, a bit lackluster, I feel like. And it's going to have a cliffhanger that's really predictable. Thrawn got away. Yeah. Surprise. But friends, you can find me being a lot... Who could have seen it coming? Friends, you can find me on social media at Genuine Chit-Chat. I'll put links to all of Andy's stuff in the description as well. And if you want to hear me be a lot more positive about Star Wars stuff, listen to some of my book reviews, listen to some of my Star Wars conversations that are not the weekly discussion shows and things, and check out my episodes of Star Wars Comics in Canon. You never have to have read a Star Wars comic in your entire life. I go through the plot details, give you bonus content, more fun little tidbits I find along the way, and I've tackled every single piece of High Republic content from Series 1 and from Phase 1 and Phase 2, so go and check those out. Subscribe on YouTube, like, share with your friends, tell us what you think. Please, if you disagree with us and you think there are big holes and explanations as to why we're criticising these things, and you have an explanation and a reason at why XYZ makes sense, please let us know. I'd love to hear it in the comments. But friends, it would be great. Friends, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for listening all the way through this. Thanks again to Andy. We'll speak to you very soon, and may the Force be with you.